Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and this is part 2 in my Oblivion chest armor build series. In part 1, I went over how to make the front and the back of the chest armor. In this part 2 video, I'm going to be showing you how to make the pauldrons. Now, if you notice, these are not raw anymore. They now have some texture and a base color on them, and that's because I was going to add paint into this video, but I got so involved in the textures, and I feel that this paint job is going to be pretty in-depth, that I decided to put that as a separate video. So in this video, it's just going to be about the pauldrons, and the next video will be all about textures and paints. So let me show you how to put the pauldrons together. Let's go ahead and get started. Just like the chest, the pauldron pieces will need to have angles cut to get the desired shape. These are going to be noted on the template, and if there is no notation, it's just a straight cut. Part A will be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam, making sure to note the angles. This will allow these pieces to have a nice gradual curve once assembled. The bottom half of the pauldron will be made up of part B. This is going to have a steeper 20-degree cut at the top, but the same 10-degree on the inside. After these pieces have been cut out, I can then take my heat gun and lightly heat up the foam to start to manipulate it. And I love this type of engineering because it shows how flat pieces of foam become a three-dimensional object. Because I need these seams to be pretty strong and stick fast, I'm going to be using some weldwood contact cement. After the contact cement had dried, I start with the part A pieces. I press them together in the middle at the bottom and I work my way to the top. I can then repeat this step for the part B piece. Contact cement can now be applied to the bottom of part A and the top of part B. Now, because of the angled cut to the top of part B, this can be a little tricky. I found it easiest to start in the middle and line up that central seam and then work my way to the outside. After the two halves have been stuck together, I can then flip the armor over and press together the back seam. And it's okay if your seams here aren't perfect. I'm going to knock them down a little bit with my rotary tool, and they'll eventually be covered with 2mm strips, so it's going to look seamless. And here you can see how I flatten those seams down using a smooth sanding drum. The top of the pauldron has a neck guard, which is going to be made up of part C. This piece will also be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam, making sure to mark placement for the rivets. For this piece, it has a 10-degree cut on the inside seam, matching part A. So after a light heat treatment, some contact cement could be applied to this inside seam. Once again, it's easiest to line up the outside seam that's going to be visible and then flip the armor over. And if you notice, I did add a 20-degree cut to the back side. This cut isn't necessary, I just thought it gave the piece a little more visual interest. Because of how tight the fit is, contact cement is going to be a little bit difficult to use here, so I switched over to some Bob Smith super glue. That way I could apply just enough where I need it, and start in the middle and then work my way to the outside. Each pauldron has a central stripe detail that's going to be made up of part D. I want this to conform pretty well to the overall shape, so it's going to be traced and cut out of some 2mm foam. Just like the back piece, I prefer to use super glue for these types of details. The gel consistency has a really strong bond, and like I'd mentioned before, it keeps the build clean. Now, of course, I'm trying to make the Oblivion armor, but feel free to move any of these details around to make it custom for you. Part E will make up 2mm strips that will be used as edge details on the sides of the pauldrons. Now, I did make these a little bit longer than necessary, so once they're glued into place, trim away any excess foam to make it flush. Part F is going to make up longer 2mm strips, and these are going to be used to cover up the seams at the top, middle, and bottom. And you guys know me, I love hiding seams in the builds, but when it's actually part of the overall design, that's the best. Using more super glue, I work my way across the bottom, and it does overlap part D. The strip that covers the middle seam can now be glued into place. And there's one more strip for each pauldron that's going to butt up to part C. Now, I will be adding a ton of texture and weathering to these pieces, so even though they look pristine now, they won't in the end. After all the strips have been glued down, I can then take my rivet placement template and mark in the 4 quadrants. To simulate my rivets, I'm going to be using some 10mm HD foam round dowels cut into discs. But you could always cut these by hand or use a leather hole punch on some foam to get the desired shape. After all the discs have been cut, I can then apply some super glue to each one of those template markings. Then it's just as easy as gluing each disc into place. The same application process is then repeated for all the rivets on part C. Now at this point they just look like discs, so I'm going to sand them down with my rotary tool to make them look like they've been hammered into place. Any stray fibers that are still there from the sanding process can be melted down with a heat gun or pulled away with tweezers. The way that the pauldrons will attach to the chest is by having a strap that's going to wrap around the buckle from part 1. This strap will be made up of part G, which will be traced and cut out of some 4mm foam. Just like the straps that I had made previously, each one of these is going to be heated with my heat gun and then have tinfoil pressed into the surface. A little bit of Plasti Dip can then be applied to the foam to lock in the embossing. And because these are a little more heavy wear, I'm going to be using some contact cement to adhere them. Using a double adhesive method of contact cement and super glue, the two ends of the strap can be pressed together. Then both of these pieces could be marked and glued to the inside of the pauldrons. For my build, the end was about 2.5 inches in, but you can of course change that depending on how the armor sits on you. Now I actually forgot this piece while filming and I had to film it later, but part H is a triangle detail that's going to be glued onto part C. This piece will be cut out of 2mm foam. By detaching the top strap on the chest armor and then inserting it through the loop, you can see here how the shoulder attaches and it has pretty decent movement. Because there is a slight gap between the chest and the back, it keeps the loop in place so the pauldron doesn't move too far forward or fall back. So you all can see what it takes to put together some pauldrons from Oblivion. And like I mentioned in the beginning, be sure to swing back by for part 3 because we're going to be doing a deep dive into painting foam to make it look like metallics. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKSProps on Twitter and Instagram because I love seeing your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD Foam.